Okay, let's unpack this. We've all had that moment, right? You're sitting in a meeting or maybe even just at home and you're looking at someone and it feels like they are running on completely different software.
It's a universal feeling, and the frustration just builds.
It does, and you start thinking, how is this so hard? I must be surrounded by complete, unadulterated
And
idiots.
that exact phrase, surrounded by idiots, is really the jumping off point for this whole deep dive.
Hmm.
Our source material kicks off with this story about an entrepreneur, a guy named Stir, who was just totally convinced his whole team was incompetent.
But the punchline wasn't about them, it was about him.
Exactly. He had this breakthrough where he realized his definition of an idiot was, well, incredibly simple. It was just anyone who didn't think or act exactly like he did.
And once he saw that, everything changed.
The whole dynamic shifted. And that's really our mission today. We're going deep into the foundations of how we communicate using this behavioral profiling system. You've probably heard of it, the red, yellow, green, and blue profiles.
Our goal here isn't just to put people in boxes, it's to take the painful guesswork out of those interactions. We want to give you the framework so you can stop feeling like you're surrounded by idiots.
And start recognizing that people are just wired differently. And look, this isn't just some pop psychology theory. The methods we're talking about, they trace their roots all the way back to Dr. William Moulton Marston's work.
Emotions of Normal People, a foundational text.
Absolutely. And it's been refined for decades since. Companies all over the world use this stuff for, conflict resolution, sales, team building. It's a practical toolkit.
And it all comes down to one critical question, one insight that you have to grasp for any of this to work.
Great, which is that communication always happens on the listener's terms.
It doesn't matter how clearly you think you said something. What matters is how they heard it, how they interpreted it through their own filters.
Their values, their attitudes, their behavioral profile. It all shapes the message they receive.
So let's say you're a super detailed, methodical person, a blue, as we'll find out. But your team, your family, they're all spontaneous, action-oriented people.
How do you adjust? How do you put on that necessary mask to create a space where they can actually hear you?
That's the key. That adaptability is competence. And that's the knowledge we're going to extract today. Okay, so let's start with the foundations, the why behind all of this. And honestly, it's kind of comforting to know that this whole idea of categorizing people isn't some new corporate trend.
Oh, not at all. It's ancient. The human need to classify differences to understand why you're not like me is as old as civilization itself.
You can go all the way back to the ancient Greeks.
Right, to Hippocrates, the father of medicine. He had a system for categorizing temperaments based on the 4 bodily fluids. They called it humoral pathology.
And the parallels to the modern system are they're striking. You had the choleric type, for instance.
Associated with yellow bile, they were seen as passionate, hot-blooded, quick to act.
Which maps almost perfectly onto what we now call red behavior, dominant and task-focused.
Exactly. And then you had the sanguine temperament.
Associated with blood.
The cheerful, optimistic social butterfly. The life of the party, which is a perfect description of the modern yellow profile. They're all about relationships and influence.
Then you get the phlegmatic type.
Linked to phlegm, calm, leisurely, easygoing. They're the steady ones.
Our modern green stabilizers.
That's them. And finally, you have the melancholic temperament.
Black bile. The serious, analytical, meticulous one.
Your classic blue profile. The introverted, task-focused analyst. And this isn't just trivia. It shows that these 4 core tensions, the push and pull between being introverted or extroverted and being focused on tasks or people, they've been recognized for thousands of years.
Even the Aztecs had a similar system. Didn't they call the green types earth people?
They did. Grounded, stable. It's the same fundamental observation.
So the modern DISC model, which we're focusing on, just puts a more scientific framework on these ancient ideas?
It formalizes Marston's work. And we should be really clear on the mapping for anyone familiar with the acronym.
Right, so DISC stands for?
D is for dominance, which is our red. I is for influence, our yellow. S is for steadiness, that's green. And C is for conscientiousness or compliance, that's the blue.
Got it. Okay, to really understand why we miscommunicate so badly, we have to talk about the layers of self. I like this idea of concentric circles.
The great visual metaphor, think of it like digging into the earth. At the very center of the bedrock, you have your core values.
The really deep stuff.
The deepest. It's instilled in you before you're, say, 7 or 8 years old. Things like fighting is wrong or all people are of equal worth. These are your internal compass. and they're almost impossible to change.
Okay, so that's the core. What's the next layer out?
That would be your attitudes and approaches. These are formed later through your life experiences. For example, a core value might be smart with money, but an attitude might be, I don't trust salespeople because you had a few bad experiences.
And that's the key difference, right? Core values are set in stone, but attitudes.
Attitudes can change. It takes time. It takes repeated positive experiences, but they aren't immutable like your core values.
So you take those two layers, core values and attitudes, and that creates your core behavior.
Exactly. That's the real you, the person you want to be when all the external pressures are gone.
But here's the kicker. We almost never actually see that person.
Almost never. I mean, the only time you're truly behaving according to your core self is when you're completely uninhibited. Maybe when you're asleep.
So what we see day to day is the outermost layer.
The moderated behavior, the mask. It's the face you choose to show the world, whether you're trying to impress a client or calm down a crying child. You're adapting to the situation.
Which brings us to this formula that the source material presents. Behavior equals a function of P times SF.
Right. Behavior is a function of personality and surrounding factors. And this isn't just, some abstract equation. It's a practical guide.
Break that down for us.
Okay, so P is personality. That's the actor. That's their core wiring, their red, yellow, green, or blue tendencies. It's mostly fixed.
And SF is the surrounding factors.
That's the stage. The lighting, the set design, the expectations of the audience. And here's the most important part. You can't really change the actor. You can't change their personality.
But you can change the stage.
You can absolutely change the stage. You control the surrounding factors. You can't make a blue person less detail-oriented, but you can give them all the data up front in a meeting. You change the environment, and you influence their observable behavior.
That's true emotional intelligence.
It is. It's about working with what you've got.
Before we dive into the colors, we need to define what normal means here, because the source is very clear about this.
And it's so important. No behavior pattern is inherently right or wrong. You are fine the way you are. The whole point of this is to understand how you are perceived by the other 75% of people who aren't like you.
So normal just means predictable.
Predictable, understandable, observable, and crucially excusable. It's about fostering tolerance by realizing the other person is operating from a logical place, even if it's not your logic. And remember, most of us, something like 80%, are a blend of two colors, which adds all the nuance.
All right, let's get into the specifics. Let's define these four profiles, not just by what they do, but what drives them. We have to start with red behavior, the driver, the competitor.
The Reds. They are your extroverted, task-oriented people. Their entire focus is on getting things done, on swift action and concrete results.
They hate inefficiency.
Despise it.
Yeah.
And ambiguity. If you're in a room and someone answers a question before anyone else has even processed it, you've probably found your Red.
And their core motivation is what? Control.
Control and victory. They
Yeah.
see competition in absolutely everything. I love that story from the source about the author's neighbor, Pele.
And the gardener.
Yes, he takes up gardening, not because he loves plants, but purely to have a better lawn than his neighbor. He turns a peaceful hobby into this arms race.
Because he has to win. It doesn't matter if it's a corporate takeover or a game of Monopoly with the kids.
Winning is the only logical outcome for a Red. And their core fear is the opposite, being controlled by someone else or being taken advantage of because of inefficiency.
Their relationship with time is also a huge tell. It's like a clock that's always about to run out.
It's a finite resource that's draining away. Quick is the highest virtue. They will lose interest in a nanosecond if a discussion drags on without a decision.
Like that CEO who just cuts a meeting short saying, "It's only a few million in investments. How hard can it be?"
That is pure Red thinking. A 70% solution right now is infinitely better than a 100% solution next week.
And that urgency dictates their communication style.
It's abrupt. It's direct. There's no fluff. The source mentions this 8-second phone call. Were you looking for me? No. Okay, click.
No, how are you? No, talk to you later.
Zero. Just the necessary data transfer. They're not trying to be rude. They're just being efficient.
Okay, let's shift gears to yellow behavior. The enthusiast. The socializer. Also an extrovert, but where the red is task-oriented.
The yellow is relation-oriented. They're all about people. They run on charisma, optimism, and social energy.
They're the ones who are great at motivating people.
The best, because they think in pictures. They can see the amazing future and describe it so vividly that everyone else gets swept up in their excitement.
And their main driver is social recognition.
social recognition and excitement. They need to feel liked, to be the center of positive attention.
Right.
Their core fear is being rejected or publicly embarrassed.
The story of Mike, the most jinxed man, is a perfect example of this.
Oh, it's brilliant. The guy wrecks his car, an old Alfa Romeo, just smashes it into a lamppost.
Yeah.
And his reaction is not despair,
He just climbs out the other side.
and basically carries on with his day. It was an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. Yellows just can't stay upset for long. Their optimism is like a cork in water. It just pops back up.
And that energy is infectious.
It is. They can inspire people to do incredible things just by refusing to acknowledge negativity. The source talks about a sales motivator, Marianne, who could get her team to jump out the window with sheer optimism.
And for them, it's all about the who, not the what.
Yes. A red asks, what are we doing? A yellow asks, who is doing it with me? They need that functioning, positive social network to thrive. If the vibe in the room is bad, they feel physically ill.
Okay, now we pivot to the introverts. First up, green behavior, the stabilizer, the listener.
Right, so like the yellows, they're relation-oriented, but they get their energy from within. Greens are, in many ways, the most common profile, the average of all the colors.
So calm, reliable, easygoing.
Exactly. They are the balance. They bring serenity to chaos. Their primary goal is to not offend anyone. They put the team first, but they will not take the lead unless someone tells them to.
Their core motivator is stability and harmony.
Above all else, they are fantastic listeners because they genuinely care about people's problems. A red is listening for the point, a yellow is waiting for their turn to talk, but a green is actually hearing you.
But that listening doesn't always mean they're going to act.
No, it doesn't. Listening creates harmony. Action can create conflict.
And their selflessness can be a double-edged sword, like the story of Maja, who was always the one remembering birthdays and covering for everyone else.
She was a huge risk of being taken advantage of. But the source says she did it because it simply made her feel good to take care of the group. It served her need for cohesion.
And they will not ask for help. It's almost physically painful for them.
The story of Christopher is just mind-boggling. He's locked out of his office in the freezing cold, snow everywhere. He calls the author.
And talks about the author's boiler problems for 15 minutes.
For 15 minutes. Only at the very end does he casually mention, oh, by the way, I'm freezing to death. Could you give me a ride? A green will never impose. Their core fear is letting the group down or causing instability.
Okay, last but not least, the blue behavior. The analyst. The perfectionist.
Our other introvert, but this one is highly task-oriented. Blues are defined by one word: precision.
Quality, rules,
Procedures.
meticulousness. Their core motivator is to be accurate and to produce quality work. Their first question is always why. Why are we doing this? And their second question is, how are we going to document it?
They're the quiet person in the corner who actually knows everything.
They're the ones who've already read the manual, front to back. They know the Super Bowl attendance stats. They know the difference between advisor and advisor, but they rarely show off. Being correct is its own reward.
Their core fear is making a mistake.
Or being criticized for shoddy work. It's a deep personal offense to them.
And this obsession with detail can drive other people, especially reds, absolutely crazy.
Oh, completely. Think of that CEO from the packaging industry. He doesn't just want a meeting. He wants a precisely calculated 50-minute meeting. He doesn't just want a proposal. He wants the 85-page proposal and then the entire 300-page training folder. He needs to eliminate all risk before he makes a move.
And when something goes wrong, a blue doesn't just fix the symptom. They go for the root cause. They see an oil stain on the floor.
They don't grab a mop.
No. They ask, why is the gasket leaking? Why did we buy these cheap gaskets in the first place? We need to review our entire purchasing strategy.
The story about your father, the engineer, is the perfect blue anecdote.
It is. A truck drops a pile of gravel for a patio. The delivery note says exactly how much is there. But does he trust it?
Of course not.
Gets out a tape measure and calculates the volume himself based on the circumference and height of the pile. And then he insists on laying the patio with an incline of exactly 1 centimeter per meter.
Why?
Because he says it says so in the book. For a blue, the documented procedure is reality.
So we've built up this picture of the strengths of each profile. But this is where the whole surrounded by idiots idea comes from. Because when you view those strengths through the lens of an opposite profile,
They immediately look like weaknesses, crippling weaknesses. This is the perception gap.
let's start with how reds are perceived. When a green or a blue looks at a red, what do they see?
They see someone who is belligerent, arrogant, egotistical, unyielding, aggressive, and dictatorial.
The red's constant use of the word I think, I want, my way or the wrong way, it comes across as incredibly selfish.
To a relation-oriented person, it does. They see the red's decisiveness not as efficiency, but as a complete disregard for anyone else's thoughts or feelings.
And they can seem so insensitive, like that CEO, Bjorn, who asks about your daughter.
But you can see him lose interest after 20 seconds. The moment he has the data problem solved, the communication channel is closed. He's moved on to the next task.
But to the other person, that feels incredibly dismissive, like you and your meaningless details don't matter.
And that directness can feel like a personal attack.
Yeah.
The source has this scene at a dinner party where a red consultant just lays into this stressed-out green-blue guy.
Right, he says, I think you complain too much. I would never end up in your situation.
The red sees that as tough love, as motivation. But the green-blue guy just feels assaulted, attacked, and humiliated.
Okay, how about the yellows? How are they perceived negatively?
Task-oriented people, your reds and blues, often see yellows as selfish, superficial, and easily distracted. But the biggest complaint,
They talk too much.
they talk way too much, and they are terrible listeners.
The data on that sales manager is damning. One agenda item out of 19.
And he speaks for 69% of the meeting. It doesn't matter if he knows anything about the topic. The conversation is a stage, and he has to be the star.
And their relationship with time is a nightmare for anyone who values punctuality.
They are hopeless at keeping time. But what's fascinating is how they reframe it in their own minds. Being 45 minutes late becomes, oh, I was just a little over 15 minutes late. Their optimism literally rewrites reality for them.
And as for listening, the source says the information just gets lost somewhere between the ear and the brain's storage shelves.
Poof, it's gone. Because while you're talking, they're not really listening. They're just thinking about the much better story they're about to tell.
All right, let's flip it. How are the quiet greens perceived as idiots?
To the action-oriented profiles, they seem stubborn, unconcerned, indifferent, and totally afraid of change. Passive and pig-headed.
Their resistance to change is a big one, even when you show them new facts, new data.
They'll often stick to what they learned from a trusted source years ago. It's not that they're illogical, it's that the familiar path feels safe, and change feels dangerous and unstable.
And their passivity can look like laziness.
It can. The source makes a great point that sometimes they spend more energy avoiding a task than it would have taken to just do it in the first place.
And the clinging to routine can be extreme. Like soon, the guy whose whole day is ruined if someone takes his usual seat at lunch.
That need for predictability is absolute. We also saw it with your green mother, who got flustered even when a change of plans was good for her. It wasn't about the outcome. It was about the disruption to the routine.
This brings me to a point, though. This focus on harmony at all costs. The source uses this metaphor of the rotting pile of trash on the dinner table. Everyone knows it's there, but no one wants to cause a scene by mentioning it.
The greens least of all.
Right. But isn't that incredibly dangerous in a business setting? Where you need people to speak up and point out the rotting trash? Is the source saying harmony is always better than facing a hard truth?
It's a fantastic question. And the source does acknowledge this is a huge management problem. The Greens' silent resistance, the nodding in the meeting while their arms are crossed and their faces grim, that's a form of passive sabotage. They're essential for stability, yes, but their conflict avoidance can allow problems to fester until they become catastrophic.
Okay, finally. How are the meticulous blues seen as being difficult?
Oh, the list is long. Evasive, defensive, reserved, fastidious, hesitant, suspicious, tedious, and sometimes just cold-hearted.
Their biggest flaw, from an action-oriented perspective, is paralysis by analysis.
They can plan into the next century without ever putting a shovel to the ground. They get so caught up in identifying every possible risk that they never actually start. For a red, that is the definition of insanity.
And their focus on logic can come across as constant nitpicking criticism.
Like your friend Hans, who walks into your brand new kitchen, looks around, and the first thing he says is, "That cupboard door is crooked."
He's not trying to be mean.
Not at all. To him, it's just a factual observation. An error has been detected and must be corrected. But to anyone else, it feels like a personal attack.
And they don't trust anything. Everything has to be verified.
They need to check the ATM balance 3 times. They need the full owner's manual. It all stems from that deep core need to eliminate risk and ensure accuracy before they proceed.
Let's wrap this up with the metaphors for anger. How each profile releases pressure.
This is so telling. The red is a shot glass. It's an instant, loud, intense burst of anger, but then it's over just as quickly. They move on.
The yellow is a drinking glass. It holds more, you can see the anger rising, but when it spills, it's a huge emotional mess that gets everywhere.
The blue is a beer barrel with a leaky tap. They're constantly letting off steam with little grumbles and complaints. Someone moved my pen. This procedure is inefficient. It's a coping mechanism that prevents a big explosion.
And that leaves the green.
The green is the most dangerous. They are a 50-gallon beer barrel with no tap. It fills up drop by drop over years with every little injustice they've swallowed to keep the peace.
And when it finally gets full,
The explosion is catastrophic. It washes away everything. You, the desk, the entire relationship. And because they have no practice releasing pressure, when a green blows, it's often a final, permanent event.
okay, so understanding the problem is one thing, but the real value here is in the practical application. How do you actually adapt your behavior to deal with people who are your total opposite?
This is the playbook. This is step 2. So starting with adapting to red behavior. What do they need? Control, speed, and results.
So get to the point,
Yeah.
fast.
Immediately. They see long discussions as a waste of time. Your proposals should be short, a single page, maybe just some notes on a napkin. And you have to deliver your opinion with confidence. Look them in the eye. They respect drive, even if they disagree with you.
What about giving them negative feedback? That sounds terrifying.
You have to prepare for battle. They will immediately go on the defensive. They'll argue. They might swear, and they'll try to flip it around and point out your mistakes.
So how do you get through that?
You stick to cold, hard, quantifiable facts. Not, you made me feel bad, but this decision cost us $4,125, and you appeal to their ego. Frame it as them being the key to the team's success.
And there's a final critical step.
The most important step. After they agree, you had to make them repeat the action points back to you. Verbally. Lock it in. Because the second they walk out of that room, their brain has already moved on to the next challenge.
Okay, next up, adapting to yellow behavior. They want a positive, cozy atmosphere. They love excitement.
So you have to bring the energy. Strip out all the boring details. Start with the big, inspiring vision. And frankly, you have to use flattery. Make them feel brilliant, interesting, important. Their engagement is fueled by that positive social feedback.
How do you handle their chronic lateness?
You have to manage it for them. You either lie about the start time, tell them the meeting is at 9 when it's really at 9:30, or you frame the consequences in a way that affects them emotionally. Not, you'll be in trouble, but I'll be so disappointed if you're late.
And giving them negative feedback seems just as tricky.
It has to be done in private. Public criticism is their kryptonite. You have to sandwich it with genuine compliments to show the relationship is still secure. And again, use concrete data. I timed you. You spoke for more than half the meeting.
And the challenge is making it stick, right?
Yes, because their ears might not be connected to their brain. Remember the guy who, when told he talked too much, just said, "Oh, I just need to get some news stories." You have to gently but firmly bring them back to the point and get them to acknowledge the specific behavior that needs to change.
Okay, on to adapting to green behavior. They need stability, predictability, safety.
So your strategy is all about reassurance. No surprises, ever. Give them detailed step-by-step plans. Explain who is doing what and when. The source says to give them a full recipe for the dessert, not just the ingredients. Predictability is safety.
And for negative feedback.
Gentle is the only way. And in private, the most effective tool you have is to explain how their behavior is negatively affecting you or the group. When you miss deadlines, it makes me sad because it puts more stress on the team. They are so relational, they will respond to that emotional plea.
And you can't just ask them to fix it.
No, you have to tell them exactly what to do. I need you to complete these 3 specific tasks by Friday. If you ask them for a solution, they'll freeze because taking that initiative feels risky. You have to give them the safe, predictable path forward.
Finally, adapting to blue behavior. They need preparation, quality, professionalism.
So you have to do your homework, and then you have to check it, and then you have to triple check it. Come with checklists, data, documentation, use their language, careful control, properly inspected.
And no emotional appeals?
Definitely not. No feedback sandwiches. They'll just get suspicious and wonder what your real agenda is. Be direct and factual.
Giving them feedback sounds like a dissertation defense.
It can be. You need specific, accurate facts down to the decimal point. This project took 16.5 hours too long, and be ready for a barrage of counter questions. How did you calculate that? Where in the procedure does it say that?
And what if you don't have all the facts, but a decision has to be made?
That's the one time you can appeal to their gut. but you have to frame it in their language. You explicitly state the risk. I know we don't have all the data, but if we proceed, the results will still be 95.3% of what they could be. The risk of waiting is greater. You have to give them a risk calculation.
This brings us to group dynamics. Because if adaptation is a one-on-one skill, understanding this next part is key to building a successful team. And it shows why a team of all-stars can still fail miserably.
The source illustrates this perfectly with the telecom managers experiment. They took groups of managers, sorted them by their dominant color, and gave them all the same complex problem to solve in 1 hour.
And it was a disaster.
A beautiful, predictable disaster. The red group was pure chaos. Loud arguments, people working alone. They finished first in only 30 minutes. They'd solved the wrong problem entirely. They decided the assigned task was unrealistic, so they adapted the task to reality to ensure they could get a result, any result, quickly.
Classic red. Then the yellow group.
All frantic energy, lively discussions, telling stories. It was a great party. But their final presentation was just a performance, a smokescreen, to hide the fact that they hadn't actually solved the task at all. They prioritized the social experience over the outcome.
What about the green group?
It was eerily quiet. They spent a huge chunk of time listening to a sad story about someone's dog. When they presented, their spokesperson was vague, and even though the group was nodding, you could see their grim faces and crossed arms. Silent, passive resistance. They made almost no progress.
And the blue group?
Dead silence. They spent the entire hour just reading the instructions. They got bogged down in tiny details like the spelling of advisor. They rejected every idea and ran out of time, asking for an extension because they were more interested in doing it perfectly than in getting it done.
So the conclusion is inescapable.
You need all four. You need the yellows for the creative ideas, the reds to make a decision and create momentum, the greens to do the steady, reliable work, and the blues for clarity, control, and evaluation. Diversity is the only path to success.
And this leads us to what causes stress in each profile, because it's not just about time pressure.
Not at all. It's about having your core needs violated. To stress out a red, you take away their control, make sure they get no results, and bog them down in routine.
And how do they react?
They get more aggressive, more demanding. They burrow deeper into the task. The best way to help them is to give them a physical outlet or, weirdly, a direct order to get a grip, which appeals to their need for clear direction.
To stress a yellow,
Force them into a rigid structure, make them argue about petty details, or the worst thing you can do, publicly humiliate them.
and their reaction is to lose their shine.
They become sulky, unstructured, and that famous optimism vanishes. They become withdrawn and pessimistic. To help them, you have to restore that fun, positive atmosphere.
And to stress a green,
Constant, unexpected changes. Leave tasks unfinished and push them into the spotlight.
their response is to shut down.
Completely. They become reserved, rigid, apathetic. They might even become cold to people they care about. To help, you have to give them time and space, then gently reintroduce structure and predictability.
And finally, to stress a blue,
Demand spontaneous decisions. Tell them to forget the rules and just innovate. Surround them with overly emotional people.
and they respond with extreme pessimism.
Total gloom and doom. They become incredibly pedantic and will just stomp on the brakes to avoid the risk of making a mistake. They need time alone to analyze their way back to a logical path forward.
So the big takeaway is that under stress, people don't become someone else.
They become a more extreme, more exaggerated version of who they already are. The red gets redder, the blue gets bluer, and seeing that pattern is the key to managing it.
So we've really established a central truth here. The idiots all around you are not, in fact, idiots. They're just people with their own logical systems operating on completely different terms than you are.
Exactly. And once you understand the red's drive, the yellow's enthusiasm, the green's need for stability, and the blue's pursuit of precision, you gain a superpower. You gain the emotional intelligence to adapt your own behavior.
You can change your mask instead of trying to change the world to fit your face.
And that shift is often life-changing. It puts the responsibility for clear communication back on you because you're the one who now has the framework. The source tells this story about a CEO named Helena who was a classic high red,
And she was having huge problems with her husband.
a classic green. She would have an idea and want it done by yesterday. She'd get frustrated by his perceived slowness, his passivity. He, in turn, would get so overwhelmed by her chaos that he'd retreat and literally lock himself in the basement.
But once she understood the profiles, she had a revelation.
A profound one. She realized that her red behavior, the impatience, the constant change, the lack of predictability, was the direct cause of his green stress response. He wasn't being lazy, he was being overwhelmed. She realized she was the one creating the turmoil.
And this whole deep dive is about giving you the tools to avoid that kind of cycle. If you can spot your own profile and the profiles of others, you can choose how to interact, and you can cut out so much unnecessary conflict.
So much stress.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to take away. There's this fascinating detail in the source material about what happens at the company party.
Right, when alcohol, this extreme external factor, is introduced.
The quiet, rigid, introverted blues, they suddenly become jovial and expressive. They're dancing on the tables, telling dirty jokes. They start acting like textbook yellows.
And the opposite happens too. The cheerful, optimistic yellows become quiet, moody, philosophical. They withdraw into themselves, almost like a green would.
So, if these extreme factors can make us shed our normal behavioral mask and reveal the exact opposite profile hiding underneath, what does that say about you?
What untapped strengths, or maybe weaknesses, are lying dormant inside your own personality? What surprising capabilities do you suppress every day just to maintain your predictable professional self? And what does that suggest about the true, unmoderated potential that lies just beneath the surface of the person everyone thinks they know?